like, this is the OG. This is the guy that kept it real all the way down the line. Like, for crying out loud, Stacy was paddleboarding earlier today in Santa Monica Bay.
No,
Like you did, you've kept it real
no,
the
but
whole
check
way.
Check it. Yesterday, my day consisted of I went surfing. My wife and I went down to the beach. I went out and paddle surfing. Saw a couple of friends of mine, like the real OGs from Santa Monica. Came up off the beach.
I wish you were talking about a couple of separate fish.
No, came up off.
Saw a couple friends of mine.
Oh no.
Like, hey guys.
No, but then
Hey Stace. My buddies.
No, but I went up, put my board on the car, and took my skateboard out of the trunk and skateboarded in the parking lot at Santa Monica.
That's
that was
badass.
the first half of my day, But I skateboard for other reasons, man. I skateboard for, I have to do it. I have to skateboard every day.
Now, what point did you feel like you needed to start documenting stuff? Because not only did you document your friends growing up and the importance of the Zephyr team, and of course, now BonesBrigade.com.
I didn't document it then. I shot a little bit of Super 8 back then.
No, that's what I'm asking is when did you think this needs to be recorded for posterity? Because what we did was important. Did you know, at the time, do you have any idea that what you're doing is important?
It was important to us, but I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know it would go this. I didn't know it would go this far in my lifetime at all.
I can only equate it to stand-up comedy. I knew what I was doing was important, and I knew I wanted something.
Did you know you'd make it? Did you know you'd make it?
There was no plan B. I didn't know why I wouldn't make it.
That's good.
If I keep does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Without sounding like an egotistical.
The thing is, you had a precedent in front of you. You had guys in front of you that had done it.
We
didn't have anybody that had done it.
That's my job as an interviewer is what I should be saying to you.
No. So
once again, Stacy,
you
host a hell of a podcast.
Check it out though. It's like when it's not that, like, people always ask me, well, how did your parents feel about your skateboarding? Well, my parents, I was lucky that they let me skateboard. Our parents didn't have any.
Right.
They didn't have any understanding of what it was about. They had no reason to believe in it because it hadn't existed prior to
When
this.
you came out of the ocean, you couldn't watch Eddie Murphy Raw and go, yeah, like that.
Exactly.
I want to do it like that. I want to be in a theater and wear purple leather suits. Well, without the purple leather suit part, but I want to do stand-up comedy in a theater. Like, that's the end game. Or you go on, you see Red Fox on a sitcom and go, like that.
Right.
Or Bill Cosby on The Cosby Show.
Right.
And, Stacy, that's the best point that I'll never be able to come back to on this podcast is you and all of your friends and even the guys after you had you. Like, you were the precedent.
Right.
And how often in life does anybody get to sit down with the actual person that started a thing?
I didn't start it. I was one of the.
I
was one of the spokes. I got lucky. I got lucky to be the right place, right time.
So there were no surfers and skateboarders that you looked up to?
Oh yeah, there were surfers. There was no skateboarders.
Right.
We were the age limit. There were some guys that had skateboarded in the '60s, but by the time we came up in the '70s, they were gone.
It was all gone.
It was all gone. Like when Tony Alva and I turned 40 years old, Thrasher magazine put on the cover, "Skateboarding turns 40." And I'm not saying skateboarding is geared to our age, but there's never been people ahead of us. So we've always been looking at the abyss. So I'm a middle-aged guy, and I still ride skateboards. I can still skateboard in parks. Never in my life, when I was a 20-year-old kid, did I think I could do this at my age, ever, because no one had done it before.
So
it's not to say it's a big deal. It's just to say that we haven't had anybody to look at. There's nobody older.
I'll ask you the question you asked me. Did you think you were going to make it?
Make it when?
At any time, when you were a teenager, when you got pulled for the Zephyr team, did you think like, oh, I'm going to make it?
Well, I didn't know if skateboarding was ever going to become something, so I didn't know that it could happen. Yeah. But I'll tell you this much.
So weird.
But let me tell you this much. When it did blow up, I had to make it. I had to do it. It had to happen.
If you failed, you would have proved every neighbor and every detractor
I just
right.
had to do it because I couldn't face what would have happened in my life. I couldn't have just been a tradesman. I couldn't have done that. And then when my career was over, I had to start a company. I just had to, because, man, check this out.
What ends a skateboard career?
When my career was coming to the end, somehow my name got on a mailing list, and I got these interviews with insurance companies. Like, they'd heard I was a professional athlete, so these insurance businesses brought me in to interview me.
They think they're getting like Dandy Don Meredith, like, how are you?
Exactly.
State Farm Insurance. Maybe you saw me in the Rose Bowl.
That's exactly it. And I'm sitting across from this guy in this big desk, with this walnut desk, and he's in a suit. And I'm going, holy crap, man, is this my life? it was like I only got this short, brief period of what it could be like, and now it's going to be this.
Yeah.
It scared me beyond belief because I didn't know what I was capable of
But
doing.
how does a skateboard career end? Like what happens? You just can't do what the kids are doing behind you?
Well, there was another. That brings up a whole other story. What happened is after the boom in the 70s, in 1980 and 81, 82, skateboarding started to die again, and it had what's called a second death. And so people like me couldn't make money as professionals anymore, and we all had to leave the sport. I didn't have to leave because I started a company, and I was paid to work my company, to grow it. I wasn't being paid as a skateboarder. So I started putting the guys on the team like Tony Hawk and Caballero. They were little kids. They didn't need money. They were amateurs. I didn't have to pay them. So
I like that you chose all guys that if they did porn, they wouldn't have to change their names. I just
does
picture
Tony Hawk have the best
Tony,
name? Or,
not as good as Lance Mountain.
no, but if we're
Fucking Lance
Tony
Mountain with a money shot in Tony Hawk's back. That's the fucking total. You went to the amateurs and looked at the sign-in sheets and went, "Who can I cast in my pornos?" Tony Hawk, Lance Mountain, Stacy Peralta, bring you Half Pipe. Fuck. It's the prequel to Full Pipe. I'm not sure how I fucked up Full Pipe.
That's too funny, man.
But when did you start going back? Was it out of financial necessity, where you were an opportunist, or was it out of the love of what you'd experienced that you decided you needed to start documenting and putting together the things you had documented to make this documentary?
What happened was
Dogtown and Z-Boys. That's bonesbrigade.com. Check out everything Peralta.
We were a small company. We couldn't afford a lot of things. So I had to start shooting ads myself, shooting pictures
For
myself.
Bones Brigade?
Yeah, for the Bones Brigade team. And also what happened was as I said, skateboarding died again.
We keep taking turns holding in burps. It's funny. I keep looking over. He's doing it.
No,
I'm
filling myself with suds, man.
Every time he talks, I'm like, ugh. I'm sorry. All right, I just had to acknowledge it because we kept doing it in each other's faces.
No, skateboarding died in 81, 82. It was really bad. Things were pretty miserable. It was a tough business to be in. And I had this amazing skateboarding team of these guys that were inventing the future of skateboarding. They were inventing so many maneuvers, and we thought, we've got to take our thing to the world. And so we dreamt up this idea of making a skateboarding film. But the problem is we couldn't afford to hire a production company. So I rented a camera, had a little video editing system put in my apartment in Hollywood, started shooting in 83, and in 84 we premiered our first hour-long film in Tony Hawk's living room, in his parents' living room. That shows you how humble it was. His parents were there. There was about 8 other people there. They looked at the film and they go, that's pretty cool. We thought we'd sell them to skateboard shops, maybe sell, 30. We sold 30,000.
Oh, really?
Huge. Giant.
But what about Dogtown? That was the big giant ass documentary that got made into a major motion picture.
That was footage shot from surf film photographers at the time.
But you were the guy that cobbled it, right?
Yeah, I found it all.
So the same question: when did you realize there was money on the table and you could share the story with the world, or was it I need to share this story with the world?
That story was always in the back of my head. I had the feeling that someday I would tell it in some form. And in 1999, there was a big article in Spin magazine called "Dogtown in Search of Skateboarding's Founding Fathers." And when that magazine hit the newsstands, about 3 Hollywood studios bought the rights and wanted our life rights to do the feature film. And when that happened, I went, damn, they're taking my story. I can't do it. So that's when I got the idea to do the documentary. And I put the documentary together, got the financing together, and we made that. And we made it before Hollywood made the feature film.
That's even Hollywood fucked that up.
Yeah.
What made you decide to do a documentary about Crips and Bloods?
Because I grew up in Los Angeles.
I know, but you grew up in Santa Monica,
No, I
which
grew
is
up
a bunch
in
of
Venice.
French Canadians walking around in
dude.
Speedos.
I went to Venice High School. School got shut down a number of times because of race riots.
Really?
It was heavy, yeah. It was
Whites versus Asians?
No, Hispanic versus African American. They would tussle, and then they'd
tell
come
you something.
after us, the surfers. But this is really the reason why I did it. And I don't want to get too lofty here and shut me down as soon as I do.
Just keep talking into that mic.
I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm a Los Angeles kid. You know, I was a child when
I heard you're from L.A.
Yeah. This gang problem has gone on for 30 years.
And
So
this is in
I have
the
a question.
70s,
So
right?
I have a question
Okay.
for you. And
Yes,
this is the question this is how I got the money to make this film, because nobody wanted to make it.
The
This is
movie
the
is
question-
called...
Crips and Bloods Made in America.
Okay.
This is the question I finally got people to say, okay, we'll fork over the money. I said, What would happen? And I'm going to ask you this, Jay. What would happen if teenage white kids in Brentwood were arming themselves with AK-47s and killing teenage white kids in Pacific Palisades? How long would that last?
Not long.
How long?
Uh,
More than a minute?
1 year.
Okay.
1 year.
Okay,
It's the
this
same
go-
thing like if the president's daughter, God forbid, and this was back when Clinton,
Right.
Bush before him.
Okay.
If the president's child had HIV, how fast before there
Okay.
was a cure?
So is there a value? What's going on here? All I wanted as a filmmaker and as a Los Angeles, person to go there and find out, are these kids really monsters? Why is this happening? And that's
Monster
why-
Cody was a monster. He
that's
named
why-
himself Monster.
That's why I wanted to do it. That's simply why I wanted to do it.
So the African Americans and the Mexican or Latinos would get after it at Venice High.
Yeah.
Not African American on it. Let me tell you something first of all about African Americans.
I went to school one day after
They
we had a
look-
riot.
They look black.
Yes.
That's all. I'm just gonna say
Okay.
black from here on out.
That's
'cause-
pretty profound.
Yeah.
Anyways, you don't make a lot of money doing documentary films, so you got to get something out of it.
But you get crazy ass respect. Like you've become the guy.
Yeah, but sometimes you got to support yourself. So, anyways, what I
So
try
go
to do
skateboard
is
for a couple hundred G's, you
I
creep.
wanted to make that film. I wanted to see it. That was it.
Really?
That was it.
That's amazing.
That was it.
That's like my whole MO the whole time. I only do jokes that I would want to see. I swear to God.
Seriously?
I swear to God. Like
That's it.
Otherwise, I'd have 4 hours of material about like, hey, what would happen if Al Pacino worked at McDonald's? It would go a little something like no, fuck that. Like, what do I want to see? I want to make fun of fucking Vedder selling ukulele records at Starbucks. Fucking corporate
There you
Eddie.
go. Well, that's why you succeed.
Wow, that's so bizarre.
But that's why you succeed.
I've
because
never
you're-
admitted that to anybody.
That's because you're bringing your thing to. That's you're bringing it forth.
And I think it's because I thought it sounded really lofty, like
No,
you
man.
said. And when you gave me the okay.
No, that's it, man.
So Crips and Bloods, how do you get access to go as far deep into the hood as you got? Because you're pretty fucking white.
I
I'm going to call you a European American.
I'm a quarter Mexican, believe it or not.
You're a quarter Mexican?
Yeah, but you wouldn't. I'm a,
Is it
I'm
the
a
Stacy
lot,
or the Peralta?
I'm a lot Peralta, but I'm a lot Irish too. No, my grandfather was from Sonora, Mexico. But check this out. My grandfather goes from Sonora, Mexico to Phoenix, Los Angeles. When he's in Phoenix as a little boy, he's one of only 2 Hispanic kids that's allowed into the public school system. And the reason why is because he had light-colored skin.
Really?
Had his skin been darker, they wouldn't have let him in.
Man, Phoenix
So I
has
wouldn't have
their,
been here.
Phoenix has their
Anyways,
act together.
What happened is in South LA, I met a few gang members, and they got me access
Well,
to other gang
hold on a
members.
second. Let's back up
All right.
for the listener. That's just, let's not whitewash that. Like in South LA, I met a few gang members.
Oh,
Like, wait,
okay.
maybe I've met a couple on the pier, Santa Monica
All
Pier,
right.
but just because they're like, hey, you're that actor, man. What's up, Jay Moors? But like, what do you mean you met gang members?
I had met a gang member named Apollo who was reformed. I had met him years earlier, and he actually came up and was a part of the film. I got initial connections through him. I met Jim Brown.
But where do you
Jim-
meet Apollo?
I met Apollo actually at Universal
If
Studios.
you met
on a
him at the
TV
Apollo Theater, I
No.
would have just hit the
I met him
off
on a
button on
TV
the
show. I
podcast
met
and
him
just
on
went to
a
music.
TV pilot I was doing.
Okay.
Way years before. I met Jim Brown. I went to Jim Brown to get his blessing. I said, I know you've been working in this field a lot. I'm going to make this film. I want your blessing before I go in there. Because he's
Smart.
a heavyweight dude.
Yeah, dude.
And he goes, okay. And I explained who I was, where I'm from, the whole thing. And he said, let me introduce you to somebody. He introduced me to this guy named Bo Taylor. And then Bo Taylor introduced me to a number of guys in different hoods. And I would call these guys and I'd say, can I come and meet you? And I'd drive into the hood and meet them alone. And I'd say, this is who I am. This is what I want to do. This is where I'm from. This is what I've done with my life. And this is what I'm hoping to do with this film. And by doing that, I showed them a lot of respect.
Yeah.
Because they typically say, guys come in there with cameras and say, hey, can you take us on a drive-by? You know, and do really horrible things. You know, they say horrible things like that. So they show them terrible disrespect. So I went in there saying, look, this is what I'm hoping to do.
Did you ever get a situation
And it
where
was
you...
scary as hell, man.
It was?
Believe me. Oh, hell yeah, man. There's sirens going off all the time, helicopters going off all the time. And people down there are very, very tense, man. It's tense. Everybody's tense. And the gang members told me, you cannot show softness, ever. If you do, you're a candidate for being taken advantage
It's like
of.
a big, giant suburban prison yard.
I go to meet one. I go one night. I'm at a meeting at this guy's house in the hood, and it's about 10:30 at night.
PTA.
And I'm gonna go. My car's about 2 blocks down the road, and all of a sudden I'm starting to get fidgety, thinking, man, I gotta walk down the 2 blocks to my car. It's nighttime. This is a pretty intense neighborhood. So I say to my shot caller guy, I say, hey man, is it cool if I walk to my car? Like a stupid white guy, and they all start laughing at me like mad. They're just busting up. And I said, what? And they go, dude, they don't want to shoot you. They want to shoot us. They go, you'll draw too much attention. They're not going to shoot you.